The witch wound. Is that even a thing? Is it real? Given the fact that none of us living today have been burned or even prosecuted for being a witch? Or is it just some kind of spiritual hippie concept that gained a lot of traction lately and is just becoming a popular thing? And if it is real, if it is affecting us, how does one go about healing something that you don't have memories of? That and more in this video. Let's define what is a witch. Because the way the witches are portrayed in our culture and movies isn't really what we're talking about here. This is not a dangerous, scary, boogie woman with a big nose living alone in the forest and eating children. This is not what we're talking about. The word witch actually has a root in the word wise. It means the one that can see, the one that knows. These women were the wisdom keepers of the old ways, of the traditions of these lands, when we were living connected with nature. So they have been passed down knowledge from woman to woman, and we're now functioning as support for their tribe and their community. And there could be anything from healers, oracles, or medicine women, shamans. Most of the witch hunts were happening in Europe. And it started around 1400 and stretched all the way for a few centuries to like 1700s, 1800s. And in this time, over 100,000 people were executed. So this is the time kind of before Europe started colonizing the world. And that is an important clue to understand what was going on in Europe. Because when Europeans started to colonize the world, as we know, they were doing so based on this set of beliefs that's the white man's burden to civilize the world. So before white men started to conquer the world in this brutal way, taking away and beating like traditions, other religions, other rituals, other way of living out of these places that they colonized, they started to do that at home. The church was running against paganism, against the traditions, because the church obviously wanted to gain influence and power. The word paganism actually comes from the Roman Empire. It was a word that was used to describe the non-Christians. Paganism refers to the range of religious, spiritual, and cultural beliefs that existed in Europe before Christianity. It was often polytheistic, meaning believing in many different deities and gods and spirits. And it was also very intimately connected to nature, the seasons, and also often a deep worship and connection to the ancestors. These are things that sound familiar to us today, right? On the spiritual path. Things that we are like starting to feel and wanting to come back to. Simply put, it is Europeans' indigenous culture. The actual killing of the indigenous tradition and cultures happened first in Europe, of course. This was a time where the Christian church really started to gain a lot of influence and power in Europe. Believing in the right God, the one God, the Christian God. Be a good Christian to get to heaven. And of course, when there is such a picture of like a right thing, a heaven and a great God, right, there was also a huge counterpart to that. There was like a big fear around going to hell and a lot of spreading of fear around the devil and being possessed by devil or demons. And according to the Christian church and the beliefs back then, the female body was the place that was the most vulnerable to all these evils, for some reason. So it was in the female body that the devil will appear, the demons will take over, and where the woman then would act out the devil's work. There also was at this time a big innovation, a groundbreaking way to spread information. that never existed before. I'm talking about the book press. So at the 1400s, the first book that ever gets printed is, of course, the Bible. And it's the best-selling book for centuries. And the runner-up, the second most best-selling book for centuries in Europe, comes out at 1487, and it's called The Witch's Hammer. This book was obviously heavily influenced by what was said in the churches. It basically proclaims that there should be a war against these witches, and in detail, horrifically so, describes how to hunt them, how to torture these witches to give their confession. Basically, for 3 centuries, the wise women in Europe were prosecuted and executed. And let's stop for a moment and think about the consequences of that. This is really how to eradicate a whole culture and the wisdom. Because at that time, as I said, the book press has just been invented. Nothing of this knowledge were written down. These were knowledge and wisdom that was passed on orally for generations, from one woman to the other. And that's how they lived on. So by executing all the wise women, all the witches, for centuries, these traditions died. They got lost, killing off our culture and traditions and the ancient ways, which were also in big parts connected to nature and feeling one with nature and of nature, our true place on this planet, right? That we are of this planet, Great Mother. All of this died and were replaced with one God, a masculine God. And divinity became something outside of yourself, and something that you could either be worthy of or not, depending on if you were a good Christian or not. So we lost our own divinity. We lost the knowing and the remembrance that we and every part of this life is divine. This meant a suppression of the feminine energy on this planet at large. The yin, the omega, right? Shakti were suppressed and still is suppressed. And even more so, the dark feminine. Women who were in contact with their divine feminine or their dark feminine were the one that was mostly in danger. This will be the archetype of the witch, but also of the wild woman, of the healer, of the shaman, the sex priestess, of the channeler, the oracle, and the medicine woman. It is a wound that echoes through time because of the ways that whoever were the survivors had to adapt, had to shut down, had to disconnect from. Those strategies to survive are also part of shaping the witch wound. So in this way you can see that we all have some kind of witch wound, right? It is a collective wound in the feminine consciousness. It's something that happened to us as a culture. So you can imagine all of this that used to be like an actual externalized threat has now become an internalized prison. We have adapted to that threat, and now we live by these invincible cultural norms and ideas and beliefs. It's like we have an internalized witch trial, keeping our own witch constantly on trial, locked up to keep ourselves safe. Maybe we can call it a witch closet. So what have happened is that we have learned as women to dim our light, to hide our gifts, and to shrink our powers as a survival strategy. We have a lot of internalized beliefs of what will people think, what will the neighbors say if I do this, right? What has been put there is the concept of being a good girl, a good woman. Somebody who pleases, who fits in, and who doesn't ruffle too many feathers, right? Somebody comfortable and pleasant to have around. That is the lid that is holding down our true power and essence. Is the witch wound real? In my view, very much so. but it feels more elusive because it isn't just personal to this one body, the human that we are living in this incarnation. It is connected to our past lives. It is connected to our ancestral lineages. It is connected to the collective consciousness, since it was a crime and a wound that happened on a cultural scale, on a big scale, disconnecting us from our true nature, our beliefs, our traditions, the medicine, basically the indigenous ways that were flourishing in Europe before Christianity. So the wound is vast, but it isn't impossible to heal. It is really such a rewarding journey, even if it is a difficult one. I mean, we get to be our own savior. Isn't that the most beautiful love story of all? That we get to be our own savior, liberate ourselves as free women, as powerful women, and come back to our feminine wisdom. They really can't kill the feminine. We are still here and we are claiming our powers back. How to heal the witch wound? That's really the big question, isn't it? And if you know that you have this healing work in front of you, maybe you're watching this video seeking answers on what to do, I also have created a digital course specifically for healing the witch wound. I basically put together things that worked for me that I wish that I had a few years ago, in like a very simple 5-step formula with things that just both videos and like worksheets and things that you can do. Just follow these steps and do the inner work with yourself in order to liberate your witch and liberate yourself. So if that calls you, you find all the details, and I think it's here, right? In the description somewhere. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.